recording has begun. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Lindsay, who is going to be sharing our accessibility slide with you all.
Thank you, Chantel. So as Chantel mentioned, I'm going to take a moment to read the SNHU access and accommodation information, which will serve as a reminder of resources that are available for our community members. So your experience here at Southern New Hampshire University is important to us. It is our policy and practice to create an inclusive and accessible learning environment. If there are access if there are aspects to this presentation that serve as a barrier, whether it's design or delivery, please notify the Online Accessibility Center for online students by emailing oac@snhu.edu or by phone at 866-305-9430. For campus students, you can reach the Campus Accessibility Center by emailing cac@snhu.edu or by phone at 603-644-3118. And SNHU staff and faculty, you may reach out to Human Resources Office by emailing hr@snhu.edu.
Fantastic. All right. So let's get started here. So you're all here for the Choice is Yours with our wonderful speaker, Bina Patel. So I'd love to introduce you now. So Bina has been with Southern New Hampshire University for over 5 years, and she currently teaches both global dimensions in business and cultural and political environment of international business. Bina works as an organizational ombudsman and has a private consulting business. She enjoys football, running, and reading, and she's passionate about teaching international business with a flavor of conflict resolution. Bina earned her bachelor's in business administration from the University of Florida, in addition to her master's in international business administration and PhD from Nova Southeastern University. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to your speaker for this evening, Bina Patel. Bina, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and good evening to all of you. Thank you for being here tonight. So, as I mentioned, well, I was talking to Chantel and the team earlier. This is a conversation. It's the last presentation, so let's make it fun. And I want you guys to be active in the chat. So ask questions as we go along. You're going to be asked to participate as well. So I look forward to that. And let's just have a good time. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So we're going to begin with a self-reflection activity. So when you woke up this morning and you looked at yourself in the mirror, how did you see yourself? And there's no wrong in this, and there's no right in it. Or how did you feel if you don't know how you saw yourself? And you can put it in the chat box. Tired, happy, nice. Wow, asleep, strong, powerful. Wow, these are really good. Worn down. Yeah, it's Thursday. Well, look at this. It's Wednesday, and I keep thinking it's Thursday. And some Jennifer says, I saw myself starring in New Adventure. Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep getting these bubbles. So, I don't look before coffee. You know what? I understand. I love my coffee too. So thank you all. So yeah, so we have a variety of feelings. We have a variety of thoughts of how we felt when we woke up this morning. James says depressed. James, I'm really sorry. I hope your day got better as we went through it. And then Brenlin says, I didn't look at myself in the mirror. I've seen myself got ready, but didn't look further. That's okay. Sometimes we're just rushing or our mind is distracted and we don't really pay attention. And that's totally fine. It's just how we wake up and the mood we wake up in and how we're feeling that day. And that's perfectly normal. So let's go to the next slide. So am I frozen? I'm so sorry. I'm having internet issues, so I shut my camera off.
I was just going to say, we hear you now, so you can go ahead and continue. Do you see the slides right now?
I just see the self-reflection activity, but that's okay. If you've gone to the next slide, I can start talking about feelings and emotions. What's the
Perfect. Yes,
difference?
that's what
Oh, there we
everybody
go.
should see. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're just
Thank
working through some
you.
technical issues.
Yeah. Thank you. I live in a loft and the internet sometimes is just wonky. So I'm really hopeful I get out of the situation. But so feelings versus emotions. Oftentimes people just sort of overlap the definition of feelings and emotions. So let's really dive into this, and then I'll dive into the bodies that we see there. Emotions are a visceral or physiological reaction. They're born in the amygdala, which is a little like a pea-sized thing in your brain, and it's a chemical reaction. It's something that you feel. It's you feel it in your body, and sometimes you don't even realize what you're feeling in the body, the impact that your body is experiencing because you're experiencing an emotional whatever, and it could an emotional pain, emotional whatever it could be. Feelings are what you process and you think I'm afraid. So feelings are associated with the thought and emotions are associated with the chemical reaction in our body. So when you think I'm afraid, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm happy, I'm depressed, these are all thoughts that are coming to you because they've surfaced they've literally surfaced from the subconscious to the conscious level. I'm not sure if you all understand. If not, put it in the chat box. But feelings are consciously experienced because we are recognizing that I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad or depressed, right? Emotions occur subconsciously and they also occur consciously. And what I want to talk about here is that emotions stay in our bodies for a very long time if we don't A, recognize them, and B, deal with them. They can actually get stored in your body, like, and that's like storing trauma in your body. So if you ever feel that deep back pain, or every time you're stressed out, like let's say you get a sharp pain in your upper left back, right above your shoulder, which is something I get, that is part of what your body is reacting to. It's a chemical reaction that's causing a physical pain. And eventually you realize that, oh my gosh, I am so stressed that, I'm actually feeling this back pain. But when you stop to think about what is causing me this pain, it's your body is already reacting without you even knowing it until you stop to think about it. And once you keep track of what's happening in your body and how and what you're feeling, this is known as emotions are data. So, in speaking more, this concept actually came from a Finnish research lab, and they basically had 100 or 701 participants. They did 5 experiments, and they gave in these experiments, they had 701 participants who were shown two silhouettes of bodies alongside with emotional words, stories, movies, or facial expressions. And they were asked to color the bodily regions where the activity they felt increasing or decreasing while viewing each stimulus. And the different emotions were consistently captured, especially those that were associated with a bodily sensation. So when you are feeling a sensation, that is the emotion. And when you recognize that sensation and it comes to you as a thought, like I am feeling sad, I am feeling happy, like right what we talked about earlier, I'm feeling tired. That at that point you are actually recognizing what emotions are. And that's very important to what I believe that thoughts are actions. When we think it, it's going to happen. I was just telling folks earlier, it's so important that what we put out will come back around as a boomerang. So I want to ask you guys, right, in the chat box, where in your body do you feel stress? Yeah, Maria says her stress stays on her shoulders. Yeah, that's a very common place. Neck and shoulders, back, left shoulder back. Yeah. So think about it. When we look at these bodies, if you're feeling happy, you're gonna feel have this tingly feeling all over. It's like a Hallmark movie, right? Or when you are feeling depressed, look at how deactivated your body is. Okay. And even in certain parts of it, you could feel stress in your legs, in your arms, not just your shoulders, perhaps all over your body. So the whole point in this is for you to recognize when you were experience something, are you feeling that pain out of stress? Are you feeling it because you're happy? Where are you, and then and acknowledge, where are you feeling it? Yeah, because each one of us feels pain or feels happiness, the extremes of both, I would say, and everything in the middle, all over in different parts of our bodies. So basically, what we do here, what I do in my day to day work as an ombudsman, and an ombudsman is a third party neutral who's here to help resolve conflicts at the most lowest level. So if you go to HR, you go to equal employment, those are all formal channels. An ombudsman, we don't even keep records. So you can come and speak to us in a confidential manner. But when people come from the workplace, I often ask them, like, are you okay? Where are you feeling the pain? Because if you're feeling it in your chest or it's heavy elsewhere, let's go get you the help that you need. That's very important. So again, when and then what you're thinking also impacts what you where you feel the stress. Sometimes when we think I'm so tired, and you're not really tired, but you just think it out of habit, you're going to feel tired, right? Does that happen to anybody? Or do you really truly feel tired because you're tired? I see some smiles. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's okay. That's common. Growing up, my mother would always tell me, if you feel tired, you're gonna think you're tired, and you're gonna feel it, and you're really not tired. And I'm like, no, mom, we're good. I'm tired. So just like I expect all of you to be tired now. So in this study, this is how we started collecting in the field of social science, probably psychology and astronomy. Not astronomy, sorry. Um, I'm having a brain fart today. Clearly, you can tell I'm tired. But in the social sciences and the physical sciences fields, of where we feel the chemical reactions in our body. And so I asked that, one takeaway that you may have from this presentation is keep a track of where you feel the pain and the emotion in your body, because that's going to help you undo that. And we'll talk about that, systems 1 and 2, what happens in the brain and how it impacts how you think and the habits you set. And if you start keeping track as a habit, it becomes an automatic thought. Okay. Next slide, please. Do y'all have any questions? Yeah. Tracy says she's cut out caffeine in her life. Yeah, that's actually really good. So, emotional cognitive loop. If we are constantly, let's say we were in a dilemma in the workplace or at school. I'll take an example here. Most all of you guys have to do discussion board posts, right? On a certain day. It's due, let's say, Thursday before midnight. Am I wrong? I know the classes that I teach, my students have to submit their discussion board posts, the initial posts, anyways. And that stress, let's say you've had a long day at work, you're a caretaker and you're a parent perhaps, or whatever the case is, or you're working 2 or 3 jobs and now you have to post before midnight. That stress that you feel in your body can actually leave a lasting imprint in your brain. And the reason I say that is because, emotionally, when we're thinking something and it stresses us out, think about the emotional reaction that's attached to that thought process, right? That thought of, oh my God, every Thursday I have to do this. I can't wait till this class is over with. I completely understand that. And that's okay. And I see some of you smiling because I'm sure you can relate. you know that's understandable, and then you don't enjoy the class. It becomes just a check in the box that you need to graduate, right? You just got to do this and get it over with. But are you really doing yourself a disservice by just doing the work and not doing it properly because you're so tired? Or do you reach out to your professor and ask for an extra day? That's something I like to do. I tell my students, don't just submit something, take your time and submit it, because you're not going to learn it. So if you need extra time, ask me, because in I am cognizant of the fact that I don't want you to think that this pressure that you're feeling with everything else going on is going to impact the quality of learning, and also impact what stays emotionally with you because you're under this stress to meet this deadline. Okay. And that's quite normal. This is normal. We're all under pressure to do a lot of things. So the emotional cognitive loop is really a loop where we are constantly thinking about a problem and associating the emotions part of it. And when we continue in this way of thinking, we actually get in our own way. So, I'll give an example of my sister. um, she's always telling me that her boss, my sister is 44, that her boss is checking in on her every day, asking her, what are you working on today? What did you work on yesterday? Things like that. And at that age, you're already midway, you've hit the climate point of your career. You don't need a boss micromanaging you. Just imagine, it's demoralizing, right? So every time he even asks her, hey, what are you working on? She can't stand it because the thought of his voice is linked to the anger she feels, because probably more likely than not, he's going to be like, what are you working on today? And that makes her mad, right? Because she feels demoralized. She feels like, I'm being babysat when I don't need to be. And I just want some space, right? Kyle says they can understand that. Of course. And it's demoralizing because you feel like, do they not trust me? But remember, this isn't about you really when that happens. It's really about the person, with control issues to a degree. But what do you do to stop this process? Because feeling that way is also not healthy. Feeling angry and upset and disappointed, it's like almost as if her boss's voice is a trigger for her. The emotional cognitive loop is really this loop that you're stuck in, and you're feeling angry, and your emotions escalate over time to the point where you maybe just blow up one day and tell her boss off, because I think she feels like doing that sometimes. But in walking her through this, I have to tell her, if you just perceive things differently, you know it's going to happen. You try to mitigate it, he won't listen. Then all you do is just send an email. Hey, Paul, I don't think I have time to chat today, but these are some of the things I'm working on. That way, you don't have to listen to his voice. You don't have to have it checked in. And you've just knocked it out of the ballpark, especially early in the morning, and just send the email. Because, but the whole point of doing it, and the whole point of listening to his voice, it's getting in her way of staying in that mentality, in that loop over and over of anger, to the point where she's now looking for another job. Yeah, so as Kathy says, being proactive. And it's relatable. I think we've all gone through it, right? Meredith, as you're saying. But the best way to go about dealing in these kinds of situations, or any kind of situation, is to, how do I break this thought process by bringing in something a little bit more positive, or even seeing things from the glass half full? What can I do to make the best of this situation? Because his voice triggers me. Do I just send an email, or do I just send a message saying, hey, I have nothing to check in today, but I'm working on this? Will that satisfy him? Yes, maybe temporarily, right? But it will also bring you a little bit of peace, so that you gives you a break from feeling angry and being caught up in this loop. Okay, so this is really important, and this teaches us, when we actually disrupt our thought process, because that's part of this loop. It's not only calming yourself down, but it's becoming more self-disciplined. It builds self-resiliency to a degree, and then you slowly don't allow somebody like that to actually affect you in any way. They're going to do it, so just whatever. You'll start to have that attitude over time. And this is one of the best ways to actually deal with somebody who does have control issues in the workplace. Yeah. Can you guys relate to this, or have you had, even sometimes even professors do it? I'm not going to lie. Yeah. 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 We have stress in everything. Sometimes just watching the news is stressful enough, right? So what do? You don't watch the news. You watch, I don't know, a show on Netflix or whatnot, right? You will break that cycle from watching the news to make yourself feel happier by watching something else. That is also okay. But finding out what causes you to stay in this negative space is very important, because our brains, it's easy for our brains to be negative than to actually be positive, because being positive takes effort. It really takes effort in your brain, because it's almost like rewiring it, and that's for humans. And the chemical reaction in our brains that goes to that negativity is quick, and it's addicting. And sometimes people get caught up in it, that if they don't have stress in their lives, or they don't have negativity in their lives, they'll find a way to create it, and that's also not healthy. Okay. Any thoughts, y'all? Yeah, Kyle says he's got stress triggers, and it can be the best mood, and the trigger flips that switch easily. So what do you do to disrupt that, right? What do you do? What is your happy place? Do you put on music? Do you go for a quick walk? Take a 2-minute breather? You know, think about what makes you feel just a little bit more calm, and do it. And you can excuse yourself to, if you're physically at work like I have to go, and excuse yourself and say, hey, I have to use the bathroom, and then just get out of that situation if you can. Okay. But if you can develop some best practices, like good habits, that can help you sort of break these cycles. Yeah, reading a book, walking. Walking does a lot actually. I try to walk after work every day, and now it's become an addiction. Next slide, please. Yeah. Music. Music is so soothing. Yeah. So I wanted to share a personal example about what gives me energy and what puts me in a happy place. And I'd love for y'all to share some too. So I'm a workout addict. I love working out. I try to meet my ring goal every day, about 500 calories. That's right. It's not much, but it's a lot for me. Um, so my brother and I, all my siblings, we actually share each other's workouts. Right? We can view each other's workouts, and it's actually I figured out it's not really healthy. We're all a little competitive, and some more than others, and it's really not good because it causes some level of resentment, if you can believe it. But in our family, my brother began sharing exercise calories of the day with everyone. In fact, he would send me a picture, a snap, and say, "Hey, guess what? You and I are the ones killing it this week, killing it today," which was great for a minute until I realized that I started comparing myself to my cousin's sister, who here, this is a real example, who actually burned 440 calories in a 45-minute workout. So at first, of course, I thought, wow, I can beat her. You know, hey, I can beat her. This is great. Hee hee. And I literally thought that. Okay. The following morning, when I was working out, I was struggling with my workout. Talk about karma, right? Not only did it hit me as I was doing my jump rope that it was hard to burn 440 calories in 45 minutes because she had done weight training that day. We're both very petite and short. So, she probably lifts more than I do too, so I'm not gonna lie. Her workout must have been intense, and here's why. As I'm doing my jump rope, I looked down at my watch and I was at 52 minutes and I'd only burned 352 calories. Oh yeah. And then I thought, well, that means her intensity was way more than mine, and mine was nothing compared to hers, right? And then I realized, like, why am I even competing with her? This is unfair to her. It's unfair to me. And it's unfair because she is a mom, she's a professional, she has a professional career, she's a caretaker, and I don't have any of those additional responsibilities. I'm not a parent, um, and I'm also not a caretaker to a degree like she is. So, this was not right. So in a span of 40 seconds, as I'm continuing my jump rope, I'm thinking all these thoughts and I'm trying to disrupt my way of thinking, which was a competitive way of thinking, right? It's not in me to be competitive because, if anything, I'm competitive with myself. She's very competitive with me. I don't know why, because we grew up in the same household. But in saying all this, my sister taught me this. We're only as competitive as we react to the competition that's coming at us, right? So how do you disrupt these thoughts? How do I take away this feeling of, haha, I'm going to beat you, that emotion, right? And that cognitive way of thinking, that just the way of thinking, that competitive way. And that was to actually disrupt my thoughts in those 40 seconds and think, this is really immature, Bina. You can't be doing this. And look at you. You're not even burning half the calories that she's burning. So while this is just a minor example, I would say, think about all the examples in your life where you faced competition or you faced experiences that kind of had led you down a rabbit hole. And how do you get yourself out of it? How do you disrupt your thinking in that moment? Because that's what this is about, is disrupting yourself the moment you start thinking negatively or you start thinking in a way that is unhealthy for you. How do you get out of it? How do you just snap out of it? And that just starts with self-reflection. It starts with recognizing it, and it also starts with recognizing your emotions. Have you all heard of emotional intelligence? Yeah, I see some nods. Yeah. Yeah, so emotional intelligence, it's a very simple concept. It's a beautiful concept. Actually. It's one of my favorites. Yeah. It's the ability to identify what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and how to manage it constructively, as well as understanding the feelings of others. And if you can recognize the first thing, how you're feeling and why you're feeling it, and then think about the emotions, the reactions that come out of it, right? And link to your actions, because thoughts are actions, right? Then think about how to use this awareness to maintain healthy relationships with yourself, first and foremost, and those with others. Because as I mentioned earlier, emotions are visceral, they're physiological reactions. When we see people lashing out or we've lashed out over time at something, we're actually starting to create these habits that and if we don't stop and regulate our emotions, we're always going to react, and that's always going to be an issue. And I'm not saying that you have to be perfect and not react, by no means, because we are human beings, and because we're humans, we have emotions, and we can feel, which I think we should all be happy about, because certain personalities cannot feel emotions, which is really sad. But saying all this, the bigger test is how you regulate it, especially under pressure. Okay. Any thoughts, guys? Any examples you want to share, or can you relate to the one I shared? Yeah. Self-awareness. Yeah. Yeah, meditation and mindfulness. And I will tell you, sometimes meditation isn't for everybody. Um, I will wholeheartedly say I've been trained in it, and I can't seem to meditate for the life of me because I fall asleep. So I've found a way to meditate other ways, right? Not closing my eyes and sitting there meditating is not working. So active meditation is like doing yoga. I think someone mentioned hot yoga, going for a walk. Those are all good ways to sort of de-stress and to create positive habits. Any and reflection. I would say the number one thing you can do for yourself is to reflect every single day. Okay. And make that into a habit. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So have you guys heard of Daniel Kahneman? Have you heard of him? Yes, no. It's like frozen for me. Okay. Daniel Kahneman is like he is actually one of my favorite authors. And he's written the book Thinking Fast and Slow, among others. He's just recently published other. But this is the one that I would say, if you guys want to read his book, read this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's right there on the slide. And basically, what he says is that we have two types of systems in our brain. System one, that is built on habit. It's built on doing things unconsciously, and we associate feelings and instinct and intuition to these habits that we've created. Because as human beings, we are creatures of habit, right? So we're always on automatic pilot. So think about it this way. When you wake up in the morning, you could stare at yourself in the mirror, brush your teeth, make your coffee, or you have a routine that you go through every morning, right? Maybe you make your bed and go start drinking your coffee. Whatever the case is, we have a habit or a routine that we follow every day. And we do it to a point where it's so automatic that we don't even realize that we're doing it. So think about a time when you've gone to work, you've driven to work, and you've just kind of made it there, not and then thinking back, wow, how did I make it? But your mind was thinking something else, right? You were in deep thought, or you were listening to music or the news, and you were thinking something else. All this is done out of habit. And a lot of this we learned over time by using our system two. System two literally helps you to rebuild and reconnect the neurons in your brain, because think about learning something new every day, right? When you're in your class, you're learning something, right? And that is helping your brain, not just build these neurons and these connections, literally physical connections, but that it takes effort to do it. So sometimes you have to slow down and read it twice, read it 3 or 4 times, the concepts, to actually understand what you're reading, right? It's that rational part of your brain that has to put the effort on. So if you're accustomed to working hard and having to always put on that thinking hat, then you're accustomed to always thinking and self-reflecting, because self-reflection actually starts with system two. When you make an effort to make new habits or to create new habits, it will automatically go into system one after a period of time, to the point where you don't even realize that you're doing it subconsciously. Okay. So system two is that rational part. What I want to share here is that it's not just self-reflection starts in that system two part of your brain, where you are forced to sort of retrain your brain to reflect. For some people, they really have a hard time with it. I meet people at work every day, and sometimes they're like, Bean, I don't want to do this. I'm tired of thinking. I think all day, and that's okay. But if you even try it for even 5 minutes, you know, try it, just give it a try, then you get into the habit of how what went on that day, how you reacted and how you acted, what you said and how did it make the other person feel if you talk to anybody that day, right? If you run these scenarios back in your mind, think about what you could do to not only regulate your emotions, but what you could do better when it comes to whatever you're thinking about. Okay, and that in itself becomes a habit, and that's what this is about. So if you don't want to be caught up in that emotional cognitive loop, it's really important to self-reflect and make that a habit. Just go back and think, rewind that I'm going to say tape for those of you who are from the millennia or even older, that tape in your brain so you think about it. Because at that point, you're forcing yourself to acknowledge your feelings, acknowledge the experience, and understand how you could react or act the next time around. Let's say a situation occurs, right? Yes, rewind the tape. Thank you for that. Yeah. My parents always say that. Karen, thank you. So I want you guys to understand also that when we look at bias and stereotype and trauma, and this is just a tidbit I want to add, when we associate an issue with that's traumatic for us and it becomes an imprint in our brain, we actually see the world through that lens, through the bias and the stereotypes associated with the experience that we had. And that's really important for us to recognize how bias also can sit subconsciously in our brains. We've seen this with transgenerational trauma. And I'll give you a real life story since we have some time. Okay. I was deployed when I worked at FEMA. I was deployed in New Orleans, and I we had back to back hurricanes that year. And what FEMA does is that they hire locals, and so we hired folks from Louisiana to come work with us while they were processing the trauma of not just losing their homes but also helping people. Um, I was so fortunate to meet someone from the plantation generation, and these are the folks who have actually grown up on the plantations that their families and their ancestors worked on. And it wasn't long ago that they actually were free. They still had people living on plantations up until the 1930s. That was like yesterday, y'all. And so, but what I wanted to talk about here is that the stories that were passed down about certain races, right, was indicative of how people acted and reacted in the workplace. And I will tell you, I met a lady. Her name, I think her name was Lucy, and she actually could not look at a Caucasian male. She could not look at that person in their face because she was taught, in conversing with her, she was taught not to trust them. And this was the stories that were passed down over time. And she always said, Bina, like I like my coworkers. They haven't done anything. They're really nice people, but I was taught this. And I told her, I said, you were taught this based on the stories that you heard from your family members, right? And I don't want to discount them or negate them in any way because these are real life experiences and stories. But you were taught to see the world through their lens, through the lens of those stories. You're actually seeing something different and something maybe contrary. And she was struggling with it. And she said, I feel really bad thinking this way because I love my coworkers, but I don't want to look at him because I was taught not to. And I said, look at him, talk to him. Would that be hard? And she's like, no. She goes, oh, well, I don't know. I said, let's just do it. Let's do it together. Right. And slowly she started opening up and warming up. But it took time. It didn't just happen overnight. I was there for well over 6 months. So what I'm trying to tell you is that when we experience something or we experience something from other people's stories and narratives, we stop giving people a chance because we are being taught now to look at the world from that lens, that bias, and we don't even realize it. And that is bias, implicit bias to a degree, because it's the imprint in your brain that's being left, right? And that becomes a systematic thought over time. So if you want to rethink things and you want to give people a chance, then you know what? And everybody deserves a chance, is what I told her, right? What your family dealt with was it's very unfortunate. But what you're dealing with is actually, she goes, it can't even compare. I said, yeah. So in saying all this, she had to put on her rational thinking hat and she was doing it. And she was slowly and effortfully giving that person a chance. Okay. So, any questions, any thoughts? It was such a powerful, it was such a great deployment. Yeah. Yeah, Jane, it was very hard for her. It was actually hard for her to open up to even me. When if she first met me, um, she wouldn't even look at me. But more importantly, I saw she wouldn't even look at my colleague, and he's a Caucasian male. And I noticed that every time she spoke like standing up with her fist clenched. And I don't think she realized she was doing it, but like I could see it from the nonverbal cues how she was reacting, and that's when I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder if she's a local and she's gone through this because I had visited plantations on the weekends that I had off. And what I realized also, and something I learned from her, is that they were given a small piece of land, and they lived in these trailer homes right on the outsides, like right in front of the gates of the plantation. So it was so that in itself, in my opinion, is traumatic. But that is the land they were given, and they had passed down for a very long time. And not having money, it's hard to sort of break free from that physically as well. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. And I can't and I had the crisis counselors that were with us actually go help her because they're actually trained to help her. I'm not a psychologist or a traumatologist by any means, but it was eye-opening for me, and it's something I shared with leadership, that we need to help all of our people and we need to recognize this. So yeah. Any thoughts? Shall we move on? Right. Yeah. So here's some, thank you, practicing self-reflection. So these are some things that personally I have done. I do. So I'm not going to teach you something I don't do because I think it's hypocritical. But these are some strategies I, Bina, use, and I also share with like my students, and I share with the folks that I work with. Pay attention. Self-reflection starts with the immediate situation, the situation you're in or you were in that day that made you feel some kind of way, happy, sad, angry, fearful, whatever the case is, right? Recognize, pay attention to what that feeling was, what the situation was, and then think about how it made you feel. When you were going through it, hone into the thoughts that you felt that, especially in that situation, and recognize where is this thought process heading right now. It was there. Sometimes when you go through conflict, okay, um, we don't recognize immediately how angry we are or what triggered us to be angry. I always tell people, when your values are questioned, so let's say your integrity is questioned, it is so hurtful, right? It makes you so angry. Because for one thing, if someone questions my integrity, I get like pissed, right? So with that, I start to react. And sometimes things that come out of my mouth are really things that I've been holding back. And I don't realize that I just like basically said what I had to say at that very moment because someone questioned my integrity. But later on in the day, as I keep thinking about it, I get more and more mad. So I'm going down that rabbit hole. And instead of looking at it at a place from, okay, you know what, Bina, like take a step back. I wonder why they said that. And it's not that that they're calling me a liar, is that they were actually just asking me a question and I just took it out of proportion because they caught me off guard. Sometimes even that happens. And sometimes legitimately people will question your integrity. That's very hurtful. It's very hurtful. I agree. So think about that situation. Think about the thoughts associated with that situation, and then think about um, the feeling and the emotion associated with that. And then now, afterwards, after the situation occurs, what is your thought process, right? Just like the example I gave you. And then as you're thinking that, disrupt yourself. Stop thinking those thoughts and force yourself to see someone else's perspective, or maybe where they are coming from. So even if it means putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, that actually is empathy. Rayla, I think you said it really well. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Yeah, putting yourself in the shoes of the other person is empathy in itself, and it helps you see a perspective that's very different. I also can tell you, try to look at it from a bird's eye perspective. Look at the situation from a third person perspective, because that might also help you see your actions that caused their reaction, and their reaction that caused, or their actions that caused your reactions. Okay. And with that, make an effort to recognize that negative thoughts are not welcomed. That's very important. You want to be rational, you want to look at facts. That's even more important, is stick to the facts. So it usually takes, in my opinion, about 3 days, 72 hours for these intense negative emotions to sort of dissipate. It really does. And then you start to see, when you start to play that scenario in your mind again, that situation, you actually start to see the facts of what happened, and not just a perspective or perception, because that could be your truth, which is not the truth, or their truth, which is not the real truth. Perception is not always truth, okay, but it's just your version of it. Then you want to know exactly what happened, and be the mediator for yourself, be that objective person, and look at it from the objective perspective. That's important. And if you make that a habit, and it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight, you will start to see a lot of things differently. So you won't feel like someone's coming at you all the time, or anything like that. Okay, so the whole idea here is to disrupt that thought process, because it disrupts the negative emotions, how you feel about that situation, and you actually free yourself from that. You get out of your own way, which is even more so important. The other thing I'll tell you is, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Daily Stoic. I read that. I love reading it. It gives me some hope every day, when things can get real tough at work sometimes. But the Daily Stoic, and I'll show you on the next slide what it is. It's a book of proverbs that some of these famous philosophers said, and it kind of gives this perspective of how we should be, or how we can regulate our emotions, even in the toughest of times. It's pretty interesting. So if you guys want to read it, I would definitely recommend it. I give it as a gift to people. I just recently gave it to one of my old bosses, who was promoted to a 1-star general. I gave it to him, and I said, you're going to face a lot. You're going to face even more now. And read one every day. And he just laughed and said, I'm not going to read this, Bina. And I said, no, I think you should. It might help you, actually, because you don't know what situation you're going to face. So I'll put it, Lisa, I'll put it on the next slide. I've got pictures of the book so you can look at it, and it comes with an accompanying journal. I'll be honest, I don't journal. I don't have time for it, and I'm not into it. But if you are, I hear it's really good. It works really well. Okay. And in saying all this, start to release some of these thoughts, because you'll start to forgive these people, the people that impact you. You forgive yourself, and you do it for you. Forgiveness is really for you. It's not for the other person, but to release yourself from all that negativity and all that. So, and that's really important when we are looking to find our energy. Okay. Any thoughts, guys? I might give you some time back. Yeah. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, so there it is, the Daily Stoic. These are the 3 books I recommend. So you can get it at Target, you can get it anywhere. Amazon has it, and they even have the journal. Like I said, I don't use the journal. My brother-in-law uses it, and he said it works really well. And also the book Thinking Fast and Slow. I would really recommend that book. There are notes on the internet. If you guys want to look up like a book synopsis of it, so you don't have to buy the whole book, or if you don't want to read the whole book, I think there's something on the internet where it's broken down by chapters. So read that. If that's easier for you, then read that. Or do an audiobook. These are all on audio as well. Yeah, I highly recommend it. And you don't have to agree with everything in the book. Let me put that out there. There's a lot of the times in the Daily Stoic, and I'm having a rough day, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. No, but if you keep an open mind, like, and every day is a new day, right? It'll help sort of get through it. Yeah. Any questions, guys? If you need any other book recommendations, let me know, because I love books. So yeah.
Fantastic.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. I think
Great, great
is there any?
recommendations. Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you.
great question. So if anybody has any questions, as we're kind of waiting for anybody that has questions or reflections in the chat, I just wanted to say thank you. I know a lot of you were joining us or throughout the day, and we actually learned from the session this morning that I think it was around 80% of our thoughts in a day are actually like negative in terms of self-talk. So some of these, reflection pieces and, things to consider when we're looking at, how is my body feeling and what I'm thinking is really helpful. So thank you for sharing some of those exercises that we can do and just sort of acknowledging, what we're feeling and seeing how that may be manifesting in our body based off of our thoughts. So such important, reminders for us to all to kind of consider. So, oh yeah, some of you were able to see that this morning. And if you haven't, we did record that, just like we were recording the session, as you all probably already heard me say. So let's see. Any other questions here? I think there was only a couple of so one general question, which was if there were any other book recommendations that you had. I'm thinking maybe related to what we kind of discussed today, where it was the emotional cognitive loop, or any other sort of recommendations that you can give attendees tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Where is my phone? Actually, I have it on my phone. I don't know where I put my phone. But the one of the recommendations I would also give you, in addition to this daily stoic, like I'm a Forbes girl. I love reading Forbes, and they always have a quote in the morning. When you first log into their website, you just go to Forbes.com and they'll have it. Those are like motivational quotes that I would recommend. And also another way to, there's another book called Radical Candor. Have you guys heard of it? Radical Candor? Yeah, I actually I used to get really upset with my coworkers, just in full can like full openly. I'm going to tell you, and I couldn't understand why certain people, couldn't think on their feet. This was me early in my career, and then I realized that it takes time for certain people to sort of process things. It takes time. And with that, I've actually worked with managers to help them understand who your superstars are and who your rock stars are. And all of us, it sort of helps you identify where you fall on that uh, uh, on that between, if are you a rock star or a superstar. And it's really important to understand that because it gives you an insight into understanding who you are as well. Okay. Another one that I would recommend, it's one of my favorite books, is called Thanks for the Feedback. This is about giving people feedback, but if you apply it to yourself, you'll actually have a better idea of how to process feedback. So when, let's say, your boss gives you critical feedback and you take it personally, which we all do. Again, we're human beings. This book will actually help you digest and understand what this feedback is, and maybe coach your manager, manage up, and give them the feedback as well. And you can actually apply the concepts from this book in your everyday life with your spouses, your family members. It's a whole nother way of thinking. And then finally, another book, it's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's also another favorite book of mine, and I use it all the time in my day-to-day work. But understanding the mindset of others will help you also understand your own mindset. And again, as I say this, apply it to yourself. Okay, apply it to yourself. And then my favorite other books, I have so many, can you tell? It's called The Outward Mindset. It's by Arbinger Institute. Let me spell that out for you guys. It's actually a whole course if you can take it. It's hold on, by Arbinger Institute. You can even follow them on social media. This book is amazing. It shares practical examples of, let's say, folks who are policemen and do street work, so they do no-knock warrants, things like that. It gives you a perspective of how they don't even view their actions, and take that and apply it to a situation you're dealing with as you're reading that book, because it'll teach you how to be more forgiving to yourself and others, and see like, what kind of a leader am I? Because we're all leaders. You don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. We're all leaders. It's just how you react and act in situations that impact that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we
You're
also have
welcome.
another question here. So, can you expand a little bit more on self-regulation when dealing with conflict?
Yeah, thank you for that's a great question. So self-regulation is really coming down to, how do I manage my emotions so I don't react? Self-regulation comes down to, let's say you get into an argument with your boss and you recognize crap, I should not have done that. I should not have raised my voice, even though he or she raised their voice at me, right? It's regulating your emotions to the point where your actions are regulated. So if someone lashes out at you, you remain calm. Let their outburst be a trigger for you to remain calm, if that makes sense. Okay. And that will help you understand better how to regulate yourself. And if you start doing that with effort, with consciously, it actually becomes a subconscious habit. So whenever somebody raises their voice at you, or you're in a very stressful situation, you actually have a way of calming yourself because you've trained yourself with self-discipline to remain calm. Does that help?
I
Yeah. And
think it
then,
does. Yeah.
thank you. And then you
Awesome.
actually see the world like that too. You actually see anything that comes at you. It could be a setback, but you don't get stressed out about it. It's kind of nice actually. Yeah. Mhm.
Taking the power back, I think is what we call that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So another person has asked in the chat, how do you balance self-care with productivity when finding coping mechanisms?
Yeah. So the way it comes down to, that's a great question. The way I think I would recommend it personally is that you figure out what are your boundaries and stick to them, because part of coping is to also put a time limit on yourself. Like, for example, I'm not going to work past this time, and when I log off of work, because a lot of us do work from home, I'm sure some of you work from home, make a conscious effort. Let's say you shut off your laptop, you literally close the lid, right? You close the lid of your the top part of your laptop. You make a pact with yourself that you're not going to think about work afterwards. You're not. You refuse to do it, unless you're in self-reflection mode. But the idea here is when you cope, it's by putting a boundary on yourself of A, what you're going to put up with, B, recognizing what's unhealthy for you that's making you stressed out or feeling upset or depressed, and C, what are you going to do about it, right? How are you going to actually, become more self-disciplined in consciously breaking those thoughts, and actually using action like closing your laptop, or logging off, control alternate delete, like those physical motions of separating yourself from that work mentality, let's say, for example. Okay, and with that, that will help you cope as well. And coping mechanisms, they're different for everybody. I can tell you, go to yoga, go meditate, go for a walk. I learned last year that once I started walking, 3, 4 times a week after work for just not even 20 minutes, I just go for a quick walk. It actually helped me get calm down, and sort of, I was so tired that I actually didn't want to think about work, and it kind of helped. And that was my coping mechanism. So try things out that would physically remove you from the workspace, get you out of the house, sometimes even the fresh air. And that in itself will also physically help your brain and your body, and help you learn to start coping. Again, you have to try these things to see what sticks with you, because each of us, we're all different. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm team walker. I totally get that. Definitely need some
Nice.
coping mechanisms with some walking. So some fresh air for sure. We have
Nice.
a question too. I think this was based on one of your recommendations, I believe, but can you expand on the difference between rock star and superstar if you could?
Yeah, 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 definitely. So a rock star basically means that you are always meeting deadlines. You're really good at having a right attitude. You know how to get things done. And sometimes it may take you time to do something, right? And then a superstar are people who actually are able to, and maybe I have it backwards, but I haven't read this in a while. But Amy Scott, I think that's her name, would say, like, people who are very good at doing one task and they do it well are your I think your superstars. And then your rock star are people who can work under pressure, they work in the gray environment, and they turn chaos into structure, and they lead that way. Those are the people who are addicted to working in like operations, and they work in really fast paced environment, and with that they actually figure out how to lead, and they come out ahead. Like, it's an adrenaline rush. If you I don't know if you've ever worked in like an ops environment, any of you, But when you get addicted to that because you start seeing the rewards of how great you do under that kind of pressure, you can think quickly on your feet. This is not the case for everybody. And in corporate America, well, in any workplace, we see where people are compared to one another, and managers will compare their employees to one another and say, well, this person is really fast and they're really good and I can give them anything and they get it done. They don't even complain. They just figure out a way they do it. This person asks so many questions. They're so slow. And it's not even about that. It's a way of thinking. How are people, who can I rely on, and how do I take their weaknesses and make them into strengths? Because all of us have weaknesses and all of us have strengths, but you don't have one bad employee or one unproductive employee. It's just how we all work at different paces. So the rock star, superstar is that concept. And that's why radical candor is really good, because you don't want to be compared to somebody. You could have an employee or coworker who's self-motivated and very ambitious, your superstar, right? And they may have their strengths and weaknesses, but the other person, the rock star, isn't self-motivated. They have to be told what to do. They're not as innovative. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong in that. It's how you view your employees, how you view your peers in the workspace or even in school, in any setting, actually, that you don't judge people. In fact, you give them a chance. And then when you start to see it that way, you actually start to not only give them a chance, but you're patient with them and you appreciate them more. And that helps you to not judge them and to give a alternate perspective of how that person is. And again, to appreciate their qualities that they bring to the table. Yeah.
Absolutely. So wonderful. I
Mhm.
it is already 8:58, so I want to be
Wow.
mindful of everybody's time, but that feels like a wonderful place to stop today. So just I can't even believe it, but we're at almost at 9 o'clock right now. So this lead session is officially winding down with everybody. So we just appreciate you all for spending your time, asking wonderful questions, staying engaged throughout the session. It's been wonderful to spend the evening with you, or whatever time it might be with you. Thank you to our wonderful presenter, Bina, for being here and attending, and bringing all of your wisdom. And then again, thank you to all of you for bringing it to this lead session. So this wraps up our whole leads conference, which is a little bit sad, but we had a wonderful time with all of you. If you're an online student, we definitely hope to see you back in this new community and continue the conversation. But for everybody, please keep an eye out in the next couple of days for our follow-up feedback survey, with some chance to win some swag. And you'll also find the link to Leads recordings should you have missed any or would like to review this evening or this evening session. So we hope that you all had a wonderful time and that you have a great rest of your night. And thank you all for joining. You'll find some of the helpful links that I just shared in the chat as well. But thank you very much for spending your evenings. We know there's a lot of different things that you could be doing, and we just appreciate you spending the time with us. So thank you all. Appreciate you, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Thanks all.